All right, everybody, welcome to Ear Infections, the cause behind the issue. Before we get started, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter. You can find me at Dr. Brady Salcedo. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Vitality Family Chiropractic. We're going to be throwing up all our workshops on there, as well as tons of educational and informative information for all you out there. So make sure you get on top of those. Just a little bit about me. My name is Dr. Brady Salcedo. I'm the owner of Vitality Family Chiropractic. I'm a member of the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, California Chiropractic Association, as well as Epic Pediatrics, which is the latest and greatest group of chiropractors that have committed themselves not only to excellence, but to working with children with neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism, ADHD, epilepsy, as well as sensory processing disorder. And I've spent hundreds of continuing education hours specifically geared towards pregnant women and kids. That's a huge passion in our office, and that's what makes our office really unique, really, in that most people believe that chiropractic is really just for neck pain and just for back pain. Now, we are phenomenal at those and have great success with that, but it's really so little compared to what we actually do. And most of my office is pregnant women, kids, and entire families. Right now, we see about 55% kids. So it makes the office incredibly fun, and we have a good time in our office, getting whole families healthy together naturally. So let's go over some facts just before we get started here on ear infections. So in 2006, over 9 million kids got an ear infection, out of which 8 million of those got a prescription for it. And 85% of kids will have at least one ear infection by the time they're 3 years old, which is perpetuating this myth that ear infections are just normal. They're normal for kids to get. And really, that's one of the biggest myths out there. And even though that ear infections are common, it does not mean they're normal. And this resulted in about $2.8 billion in medical expenses, out of which a third of those are paid out of pocket. And it's the most common reason parents take their kids to the pediatrician or the ER. And it's the most common reason antibiotics are prescribed, which we will touch on in just a little bit here. So here are the three most common myths when it comes to ear infections. First one being that they're normal. We talked about that just a second ago. Just because they're common does not mean that they're normal. Second one, horizontal ear canals are to blame, and really that's just faulty science. What we'll discover here in a little bit is that there really is a specific role that a muscle within the skull is playing to cause that drainage, and horizontal ear canals really are not to blame. And the last one, the infections are bacterial. What we're finding now is that most of these ear infections are actually viral in nature, which has led us to really question the use of antibiotics for ear infections. So the thing I want you to get out of this whole workshop, and really the big idea behind this, is that it's more than just an ear infection. There really is something bigger going on. So the ear infection is a symptom of something greater that's going on within the body. And this leads us to a red flag in terms of how we deal with ear infections, and that is antibiotics. And really antibiotics have come under a lot of fire recently. And it's estimated that antibiotics only help 1 out of the 16 kids that they are prescribed to, which is just an astronomical and truly startling number, considering that the common side effects are rash, diarrhea, abdominal issues, nausea, fever, not to mention they destroy tons of that healthy gut immune system that kids need to have in order to have a healthy immune system. 70% of our immune system lives in our gut, so it's incredibly important. And if antibiotics are given before 1 year old, allergies are 3 times as common, asthma are 4 times as common, and eczema is 6 times as common. And it's just incredible how much of those we really see in our office. And it's interesting, and in 2007 a study was done, and the American Academy of Pediatrics changed their guidelines on ear infections to watchful waiting. So instead of having antibiotics be the forefront protocol in dealing with ear infections, the American Academy of Pediatrics decided, ear infections pretty much resolve themselves within 2 to 5 days. Let's go to more of a watchful waiting approach. And a survey was taken afterwards and found that 85% of the pediatricians agreed with this change. Great. Turns out a survey was taken 3 years later to find out who was following through, and found out only 15% of the doctors followed through with the new guidelines. And so obviously a red flag came up and they questioned what was going on. And they found out that a lot of these doctors felt that they weren't able to satisfy parents by saying it's just a watch and wait. So they felt that they needed to prescribe antibiotics to give parents something to take home and something to do for their child. And really this kind of raises red flags for us in terms of what's truly best for our kids. Obviously, we want that instant gratification, but it's what's going to have the most benefit for our kids. And as doctors, our first goal and our first protocol is first do no harm. And, just as a side note, antibiotics have saved countless millions of people's lives. So they've truly been extremely effective. However, they are being overly prescribed, and that's our main issue with that today. And MDs are phenomenal people, so please don't think I'm bashing MDs in any way. They truly come from a desire to help kids, but really research is starting to change, yet the protocols aren't. So we need to stand up for what's right and make sure that antibiotics are not being prescribed when they shouldn't be. So we've talked about what's the true cause behind ear infections, right? That's the title of this workshop. So what's really going on behind ear infections? What's causing ear infections? And really it's a three-part process. One is poor drainage, so poor drainage from the inner ear. Two is neuroimmune dysfunction, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And lastly is inflammation from the diet. So let's start with poor drainage. So what does that mean? What really plays the biggest role in draining from the inner ear? And it's this muscle you probably have not heard about before, called the Tensor Veli Palatini. And this muscle attaches from the palate, and this muscle is located in your skull and attaches from your palate to your inner ear. And it's an involuntary muscle, meaning that you can't control it consciously. And the main job of this muscle is to milk fluid from the inner ear to the back of the throat and make sure fluid is getting out of there properly. And the interesting thing about this muscle is it gets its nerve supply, so it gets its function from the top portion of the spine. And when this muscle starts to malfunction, it can lead to fluid accumulation and possible infection. So that leads us to the question of what can cause this tensor villi palatini muscle to not function properly. And that leads us to this thing called a subluxation, which I want you to think of subluxation as this disturbance or stress to the nervous system. And truly what a subluxation is a misalignment in one or more of the vertebrae of the spine that adversely affect the nervous system. And probably one of the most common areas that we find this in kids is in the upper neck, or what we call the upper cervical region of the spine. And there's some extremely important nerves in that area of the spine. And as you can see, the brainstem also lives right there as well. So there's also other common things that happen when we see subluxations occur in the upper neck. And some of those can be torticollis, maybe difficulty nursing, acid reflux, constipation, that's a big one, sleep issues, even colic in kids are extremely common with this kind of subluxation we find. So that leads us to our question, where does this really start from? And how do kids get these kind of subluxations? And really it starts from birth. And unfortunately, birth has become extremely traumatic for kids, and there's tons of interventions out there that can lead to different types of birth trauma and stress to the infant's spine and nervous system. One of the most potent ones is probably C-section deliveries, as you can imagine. Instead of the mother being able to push and guide the baby out, now she's been cut down the middle, and now the only way to get that child out is by the doctor using the head and neck as a lever to pull that baby out. It obviously creates tons and tons of stress on the infant's very delicate spine and nervous system in the upper neck. As well as stressful pregnancies can lead to subluxation, stressful deliveries, so if the baby gets stuck, or there's vacuum or forceps used, or maybe there's a cord wrapped around the neck, or even in natural births, or even if there's lots of pulling or pushing involved, or very difficult labors, that can also make it very easy for a subluxation to present itself, as well as breech presentations, and even lots of dairy or sugar present in the diet, so especially formula-fed babies that are being fed by these formulas out there that are just chock full of sugar, and one of the first ingredients that you'll find on some of those is high fructose corn syrup, which is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And this is a real pandemic, and there was a doctor by the name Gottfried Gutmann. He was a medical doctor that examined 1,000 infants shortly after birth, and what he found was that spinal injury was present in 80% of the infants that he examined, causing interference to the neurological and immune function. Now take that in for a second. That's a huge, huge issue. And what he concluded was that the upper cervical or the upper neck should be examined after all births and adjusted by a chiropractor if necessary. So a huge, huge issue in these kids. And as we were touching on with C-sections earlier, nearly 45% of children are born this way. And there's a very interesting correlation between C-section and asthma. Main reason being, instead of the child being squeezed and pushed through the canal, now they're being pulled out and the lungs really don't clear out. And so that's a very, very big issue that we're finding with a lot of these kids. So, myringotomy. So, this is the most common surgery that we see this being led to. So, kids get these chronic, recurring ear infections. Parents get frustrated, the child's frustrated, and eventually the doctor says, all right, time to put tubes in. And it's the number one pediatric surgery. It can cost anywhere from 15 to 20 grand each time it's done. And the scary thing about that is 50% of them need to be redone. And that means that some of these are falling out. You hear tons of stories like that. And the main idea behind this is it works to release pressure in the inner ear to allow more drainage to the throat. The problem is we don't have as much control over that anymore. If we just poke a hole in there, it starts draining too much into the throat and into the tonsils. So one of the most common things that we see after this is a higher incidence of tonsillitis and strep throat, because now the tonsils and throat are just getting overloaded. And once they get overloaded, we start getting these swollen tonsils, tonsillitis, and then what happens? Tonsils and adenoids are removed. And here's something I want you to think about. Is it a good idea for us to basically poke a hole and have this pathway now between the inner ear and the outside world, just nice and open to whatever the environment provides? I don't think so. So here's kind of the common cycle we see with a lot of kids nowadays. First, it starts with an ear infection. They go to the pediatrician who prescribes an antibiotic. Doesn't work, or maybe it does work, who knows? And all of a sudden it leads to another recurring ear infection. Parents get frustrated. Maybe there's even multiple ear infections. I actually just had a kid come in a couple weeks ago who had 7 ear infections by the time he was 6. Just absolutely disturbing. And leads to tube surgeries, which then overloads the tonsils and adenoids, leading to tonsillitis. So, okay, let's remove the tonsils, but the tonsils have been shown to provide serious immune function, and now all that starts to drain into the lungs and starts causing asthma, which is now in 1 in 10 kids. Very slippery slope. And the second part of this is neuroimmune dysfunction. And really everything starts with the nervous system. The nervous system is the very first system to develop. So after the egg and the sperm come together and we start developing a beautiful baby, then the very first system to develop is the spinal cord, the brain, the spinal cord, the nervous system. Why is that? Is because all other systems, the cardiovascular, the respiratory, the digestive system, and more importantly, the immune system, all stem from the nervous system. Why? Because the brain controls everything else, and the nervous system is the brain's pathway to control and coordinate the body. Without the nervous system, we would not have life within the body. It is incredibly, incredibly important. And there are 2 main sides of our nervous system, kind of similar to a yin and a yang, if you will. And the first side is what we call our brake pedal side, and that's the parasympathetic nervous system. And this nervous system really is for rest, relaxation, digestion, and immune system function. This is where growth, healing, and growth and development are really, really central around, is this side of our nervous system. So when we're in this brake pedal mode, that's where all these really can thrive. And the other side of our nervous system is our sympathetic nervous system, or our gas pedal mode. And this side is really for our stress response, or our fight or flight system. So I want you to think about if you were doing a nice hike in the mountains, all of a sudden you see a mountain lion coming to attack you, your body goes into this gas pedal or sympathetic mode, this stress response, and really at this time is your body really focused on rest, relaxation, digestion, growth, healing, development? Absolutely not. Your body's thinking about survival, so it takes blood away from vital organs, immune system function, and focuses on survival. And what happens is we get this imbalance or this subluxation that is created that causes this balance to be shifted towards the sympathetic side. So now instead of having a healthy balance between the two, kids get stuck on that sympathetic side and now start to have decreased immune function, decreased digestive system, and decreased rest, relaxation, growth, and development. It's a huge, huge issue. And really the most important part of our nervous system and our spine starts at this main breaker, if you will, which is the very top bone of our spine, right next to the brainstem. And as you can imagine, C-sections play a huge role in this because that's where that lever is created. And subluxation at the main breaker not only causes poor plumbing or poor drainage, but also causes them to get stuck on that gas pedal, like we talked about. And when a child starts to get stuck on that gas pedal or that sympathetic system, immune system function starts to decline because the body is in a stressed out state. And poor balance in the nervous system is therefore going to lead to poor function in the immune system. So as fluid gets backed up in the inner ear because the tensor Veli Palatini muscle isn't able to do its job properly, fluid's going to start to build up, which is basically a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and viruses. Now, if that happens and you have a healthy immune system, we can take care of that. But now that we have immune system decline, that's going to leave us more susceptible to infections. And this leads us to our last more cherry on top, which is inflammation from diet. And unfortunately, the diet of our children today is pretty poor. And so poor diet and toxins lead to inflammation in the body. When the body doesn't recognize something or doesn't like something, it starts to produce inflammation, which produces mucus production and buildup. And this mucus is really your body's natural defense mechanism. It's your body's way of externalizing something harmful. If it doesn't like it, it wants to get mucus so it can push it out. Same with when we get a cold and we start to have that mucus build up in our nose and our lungs. The body's trying to externalize it, trying to get it out of there. So while this is a healthy response, if the drainage gets impaired, such as poor plumbing or poor drainage, it can easily become overwhelming to the body. And really, when we're talking about inflammation from diet, there's really a couple things that we're going to be talking about. First one being milk. So what in the world is wrong with milk? Really, the main issue with milk is this protein found called casein. And it's only found in cow's milk, and it's especially difficult for kids to digest. It's very foreign to our bodies. And it causes an immune system reaction when it enters the body that can look very similar to hyperactivity and behavioral issues. And the problem with milk really is that it's highly processed. And there's two steps that go into this. First one is pasteurization, where they take this milk from the cow and they want to kill off all the bad bacteria, so they heat it up to super high temperatures. But unfortunately, by destroying the bad bacteria, you're also going to destroy the good bacteria, the good probiotic bacteria in there as well. So now you're just left with basically a bland liquid with no good or bad benefits, but just milk. And lastly, what they do is they homogenize it. So they pump it through this tiny, tiny filter, which makes it more milkier and creamier for people to taste. But unfortunately, when we do that, it also changes its composition, which makes it very foreign to the body, similar to a toxin, and can cause inflammation and mucus buildup in the body. And then the next one is grains, so gluten especially. And obviously, gluten and grains have come under a lot of fire recently. You have books out there like Grain Brain that have come out, which is a great book. Highly recommend you read it. And the unfortunate thing is it often becomes a child's first food, and most of the time probably way too early in a child's life, and becomes a staple throughout their life. So, you get all these different foods out there. They just munch on cereal, breads, crackers, cookies. And unfortunately, grains, when they enter the body, turn into a sugar. And when sugar enters the body, same with processed sugar, it becomes a stimulant to the body and actually will stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, or that gas pedal mode that we were talking about. And once that gas pedal mode is stimulated, it stimulates a stress response in the body. So you can see where that kind of leads up to. And most of the time when mucus starts to build up in the body, we see all these commercials out there for Mucinex, Tylenol, Sudafed. But the problem with all these is that they don't address the cause of the problem, just the symptom, and they really inhibit your body's ability to fight off. And it's similar. I like to describe it like a garbage dump and rats. So say you go to a garbage dump and you see, oh my gosh, there's tons of rats out here. What in the world is going on? So you throw it out, a bunch of poison out there, kill some of the rats, but they keep coming back, right? And you say, man, I can't figure out what's going on, why these rats aren't getting out of there. But then you realize, wait a second, we got to clear the garbage out of the dump and the rats will go away. Why? Because now there's no more garbage for the rats to be there for. And it's really the same type of thing in our bodies as well. If we're treating our bodies like a garbage dump, when we're leaving our bodies more susceptible to the toxins, the bacteria, the viruses, then those are going to build up. So the problem isn't the germs, the problem isn't the mucus buildup, it's the underlying issue, which is our body's inability to effectively fight those off. So limiting your body's exposure to mucus-producing foods and products will help your will help make your drainage easier on your body. So limit your dairy, grains, sugars, processed food, obviously smoking, and chemicals in household cleaning products. If you think about it, a baby spends most of their time on the carpet, and we put tons and tons of stuff in the air as well as in our carpets to clean them, and a baby's right up next to that. So the less you have to use those chemicals in your house, the better. So where do I go from here? So we've gone through all this information. Where do you go from here? First off, you need to get your child checked for subluxations. If there's interference within their nervous system that's affecting, one, their ability to drain properly, and two, their ability to have proper immune function as well as proper growth and development, digestion, you need to make sure you get that checked. And we always love to get our kids checked as soon as we can and make sure they have a healthy, fully functioning, fully connected nervous system. Two, remove or reduce inflammatory foods or products, especially dairy, sugar, and gluten. Introduce supplements to boost their immune function. So especially if they've already gone through a series of antibiotics, probiotics are going to be the best thing to start rebuilding that proper gut bacteria that they need to have. Again, 70% of your immune system lives in your gut. Extremely important. And then fourth, trust the body to do what it's capable of. So if your child currently does have an ear infection, most of the time they will resolve. But if we're having chronic ear infections, that's when we need to take that next step. But trust the body to do what it's capable of. We were given an immune system for a reason. And lastly, don't look back. It's the best decision for you and your child to make these steps towards true health and wellness for your child. You know, you saw that cycle that many kids are going on. And if we can avoid that at all costs, our world will be much, much better for it. And lastly, another tip that we have is there's tons of lymph nodes in our neck. And what you can do is if you can help your child drain, make sure that lymph system is flowing exactly as it needs to. If you put your thumb right below that little earlobe there and start massaging down your SCM or your sternocleidomastoid mastoid muscles, those are those protruding triangle of neck muscles in the front there. If you massage downwards towards the heart, it can help encourage proper drainage from the tonsils and adenoids. So that way if they're getting backed up, they can start getting cleared out. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. My email is drbrady@govitalityfamily.com. And if you need a chiropractor in your area, again, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm very well connected within a network of tons of other docs that utilize the same technology and same system that we do here in our office. So if you're looking for a chiropractor in your area, feel free to shoot me a message and I'll find one in your area. I hope you enjoyed this workshop. And again, live with vitality.